Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Holly Kreider. I'm the director of the Center for Family Math at NAFSCE, and we welcome you to our NAFSCE webinar today entitled Demystifying AI Together, Tools for Family School Partnership and Understanding. And we have some really, an exciting guest presenter today that I'm thrilled to introduce you to. But first, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping. Remind everybody, first of all, to put your name and your role and where you're from in the chat. If you have questions along the way, there'll be plenty of time for discussion. And we invite you to put your questions in the Q&A using the Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen. And we also invite you to select your preferred language. We're privileged today to have Umberto and Maricela as our simultaneous translators of this webinar into Spanish. You'll see on your screen how to go ahead and select your preferred language. You'll look for a globe icon on your screen, and then you'll select either English or Spanish.
Pues nuevamente bienvenidos a todos. Gracias a los que ya están escribiendo su nombre, su organización y de dónde son. Va a haber oportunidad también durante este seminario de web de poder hacer preguntas. Se les invita a que usen la sección de Q y A de preguntas y respuestas para poder poner sus preguntas ahí. Las pueden escribir en español y se van a traducir al inglés. También va a haber interpretación simultánea. En un momento vamos a iniciar eso. Les vamos a pedir que busquen interpretación, donde está un icono de un globo terráqueo, escojan su idioma y en unos segundos comenzaremos y lanzaremos el canal de interpretación simultánea.
Thank you, Umberto.
Holly, now that the webinar has started, I am having the same issue as last time where I'm not seeing the interpretation button. Are you seeing it on your end?
No, actually, I have a closed caption button that says my preferred language is English, but I don't see the interpretation option.
Hmm.
Um,
Probably once you launch it.
But the button to launch it is not there. It was there before we tested it before the webinar actually
oh
started,
boy.
but since it started, it has vanished.
Oh dear. Um,
Um,
Lori, I think you have a workaround for that, and maybe you and Maricel and Umberto can do that while I continue a little bit of the background in English.
sure. Let me say quickly, what worked last time was them leaving and then coming back, so we may need to do that.
To have our interpreters leave and
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Apologies, Umberto and Maricela, if you could kind of leave and come back, and we'll
Yep,
hope that
yep.
solves our glitch.
Sure, we'll do
We
that.
need AI to help us with our tech problems, don't we? Okay. Again, welcome everybody. We're so excited to have you all here for our webinar, Demystifying AI Together. Please put your name and your role, maybe where you're from, in the chat, and please use the Q&A to pop any questions that you have along the way. We'll get to those during plenty of discussion time at the end. And our lovely interpreters are exiting and coming back, and we hope that we solve our interpretation glitches very soon for anybody who's joining us and speaking in Spanish. Okay, maybe we could advance to the next slide and come back to that interpretation slide as Umberto and Maricela rejoin us. So we are very delighted to be NAFSCE is very delighted to be co-hosting this webinar with MAEC and its State Family Engagement Center called CAFE in Maryland and Pennsylvania. And I would love to pass things off briefly to Nikivia Thomas to introduce herself and your work.
Yes, thank you, Holly. So I'm Nikivia, and I am the Senior Events and Communications Specialist with MAEC, and I have the honor and privilege of working on the CAFE team. And I'll tell you a little bit about who we are. So the CAFE, or the Collaborative Action for Family Engagement, is a partnership between MAEC, the Maryland State Department of Education, and Pennsylvania Department of Ed, and national and state organizations like NAFSCE, Parents as Teachers, Parent Powered, the Parents Place of Maryland, and the National Network of Partnership Schools. And Cafe focuses on building strong partnerships among families, schools, and communities to support student growth and achievement. And Cafe is housed at MAEC, focusing on the regional needs and priorities, those areas. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Nikki. We really appreciate you. Love our partnership and special welcome to anybody from Maryland and Pennsylvania today. Okay, Lori, next slide. And I can see that someone's raised their hand. If you have a technical question, maybe you could pop it into the chat, Jimmy. If not, if it's a discussion question, go ahead and put it into the Q&A. And we'll make sure to get back to you. All right, so this is another slide about Cafe. But Nikivia, I think you've already done a great job of orienting us to that. Next slide, Lori. And in addition to MAEC, us here at NAFSCE, the National Association for Family, School, and Community Engagement, are thrilled to welcome everybody to this webinar. We really envision a world where family engagement is universally practiced as an essential strategy for improving children's learning and advancing equity. And we do that through a lot of different things. Primarily high impact policies and practices for family, school, and community engagement. And one of the efforts that is part of NAFSCE's primary work is the Center for Family Math. Next slide, Lori. There we go. So I direct the Center for Family Math. I'm Holly Kreider, and we are really envisioning a world where family math advances learning and equity for each and every child. And that's really about engaging families and children's math learning. We think AI and math are pretty adjacent, and my colleague Maggie, is going to give us a good example of how AI is actually helpful for engaging families and kids' math learning. So I'm going to pass things along to her to kind of get us introduced to this notion. And I see one technical question in the chat. Maybe Lori, you could help address Nancy's question. And now I'd love to pass it over to my colleague, Dr. Maggie Casp, to get us started here.
Thanks, Holly, and hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here today because AI is something we've been thinking a lot about over here at NAFSCE. We hear about it more and more in the news every day. And as we're out in the field talking to researchers, policymakers, and all types of educators, one of the questions we get most often is about AI and what it could do for family engagement and what tools are the best to use and what are the ethical implications. And it's really on everyone's mind. And quite honestly, it's on my own mind as well. So I wanted to share a recent example from my own life, which might feel similar to others. But on the screen, you'll see my daughter, Jillian. She's in 6th grade. And she came home the other day and she asked me to help her with her math problem that you see on the screen. And I'm not going to get into all of the nitty gritty, but in essence, she's given 4 expressions, and one of them is not equivalent to the others. And she has to basically figure out which one is different. But there's a ruse in the problem, which is that a student, Joe, insert the number 0 into each equation, which makes them all equivalent. So she has to figure out basically that you have to insert other numbers to find the correct answer or to simplify the equations. But to be honest, I was in a rush. I wasn't thinking very straight. So I decided to type the question into ChatGPT. And you can see my prompt. I said, can you help me explain this problem to my 6th grader? And Lori, you could go ahead. I'm not going to walk you through it, but check out what it generated. ChatGPT gives me the step-by-step answers. And on the next slide, you'll see explaining ultimately why Joe is wrong. So if you go to the next slide, I share this example because it's just one of the millions of ways that generative AI is really changing the landscape of family engagement and learning. And just for a little table setting, the definition person will be using of AI today, and I know Jasmine and Tali will be going way more in depth on this, is that generative AI is a type of artificial intelligence that can create new content like text, images, videos, and music. And it uses machine learning to learn from and mimic large amounts of data. And in essence, to solve math problems. And if you go to the next slide, I think what's really important here, and the big takeaway for me as I look at all of the new information coming out about AI, is that whereas previous technological revolutions have democratized information, the AI revolution is really democratizing expertise. The work of Reid Hoffman, John Bailey, and others has been really helpful, as they're really arguing that most of the other technologies that we've seen up until this point that have revolutionized our worlds have really been those that have democratized efficiency and information. So that's everything from the printing press to the telegraph to the telephone to the internet. And these tools have made it so that people could begin to get information they wanted more quickly and efficiently. But this is key. What's really different about AI is that it's access to expertise. It's agentic. It's not just information, but it's a new way of thinking and explaining things, putting in essence an expert, or in my case, a math tutor in everyone's hands. And on the next slide, you'll see that clearly there's a lot here that's helpful to family engagement practitioners. Those of you who are familiar with NAFSCE, you know we like to think about the family and engagement core competencies and what it means to reflect, connect, collaborate, and lead alongside families. But AI tools can help us do this as well. They can help us reflect, connect, collaborate, and lead. But on the next slide, you're going to see at the same time that we as family-facing professionals have a real responsibility to help families use these new technologies and tools and to understand them. And for many years, media mentorship was thought of as the ways that family-facing professionals were taking on the role of supporting families in choosing, accessing, and understanding technology. And we too have to adopt this media mentorship role when it comes to AI, because it's powerful and we have to have a language to talk about it and embrace it. So with that, it is my sheer delight and honor to welcome our presenters here today from Common Sense Media. On the next slide, you'll see their pictures, but we are so excited to introduce Jasmine Hood Miller, who is the Director of Family Engagement and Community Partnerships at Common Sense Media, and Tali Horowitz, who is the East Coast Education Director, also at Common Sense Media. And they're going to help us demystify education together. So Jasmine and Tali, I'm going to hand it over to you both.
Thank you, Maggie. And I'm going to share my screen. You can all... Okay. So we're going to jump right in. Just very quickly, Tali and I are from Common Sense Media, as you just heard, and Common Sense is a nonprofit organization. Many of you may be familiar with us from our media ratings and reviews that help family find quality, age-appropriate media titles, movies, books, TV shows, apps, and more. Some of you may also know us from our digital citizenship curriculum. What you may or may not know is that we, all of these things, our reviews and our curriculum are, as well as our advocacy efforts, are all underpinned by our independent research. And we like to say that we rate, educate, advocate, and investigate. So altogether, we see this as a whole community approach to keep kids safe and protected online. We're a bridge between schools and families, while also working with policymakers and leaders within the tech industry to make things better for kids. So Tali's going to get us started.
Great. Thanks so much, Jasmine. And thanks, NAFSCE, for inviting us. And it's so exciting to see what a diverse group we have here in the chat. And we're going to invite you to be as interactive as possible. So especially when talking about anything related to technology, we find it really helpful to think about what are our values, because that's really going to help inform our use of technology. So with that, let's go to the next slide, Jasmine. So this is an activity from our middle and high school collection. We have a digital well-being collection. We'll drop that link in the chat, and as we shared, everyone will be getting the slides as well. Before we start this activity, we want to say, so I'm a former classroom teacher. Jasmine and I are also both parents ourselves. This is an activity we have certainly done with educators. Educators have done it in the classroom with students. This is also something we really love to do with family members, with parents and caregivers too. So we're going to kind of model this activity, but we're going to invite you to participate in the chat as well. So on the next slide, you're going to see a list of 11 values. Yeah, so we're really thinking about what are values, and we'll just jump ahead. We've got vocabulary later that you can reference. But on the next slide, you'll see these list of values. So, and if there's a value up here that is missing that's core to you, feel free to please share that in the chat as well. So we're going to invite you to take a moment to look at these values, to think about what jumps out at you right now, one or two, and why. You can either share it in the chat or just reflect quietly to yourself. And I'm going to ask you, Jasmine, to share what's a value that's really resonating for you right now. Oh, and we'll go back. Yeah.
Yeah, so here's the value. I just want everyone to see the values. We do want you, as Tali said, to feel free to share in the chat, but I'll keep the values up for just a minute as you're thinking about that. And when I look at these values, I think the three that kind of stand out for me right now are balance, justice, and physical health. So those are three that I'm kind of prioritizing right now.
Great. Thanks, Jasmine. And I'm seeing a lot in the chat of people sharing different ones. Love seeing this list, the kindness, authenticity, open-mindedness. And if you want to share why, that is also great for other people. So Jasmine, I'm going to ask you to choose one of the ones you just shared with us before we go to the next slide. We can still say on the values one. Do you
Okay.
mind sharing why one of those is a value right now?
So I'll use the physical health one right now. It's just something that I'm realizing I need to prioritize more. Just something that I probably, when you're in your younger years, you think you're like invincible, and then you you get a certain age and you're like, actually I need to, pay attention to what I'm eating, how I'm taking care of my body. And so that's one that I'm really prioritizing right now.
Totally, totally. And now we can go to the next slide. And I'm going to ask you, Jasmine, to also share what are your top one or two phone activities? And those of you in the chat too, please share what are your top phone habits? By the way, this is a judgment-free zone. We are just
Absolutely.
reflecting and sharing.
Okay, so top phone habits. It's probably texting with my family, and checking emails.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I'm seeing in the chat we've got Wordle, texting. Someone said TikTok, not proud. And so, what the last part, and I already see people starting to think about this, is think about those core values you listed. And do your current phone habits support or hinder that value? So, Jasmine, thinking about, the texting with your family, the emailing, is that supporting or hindering your physical health value? You don't have to answer, but just more thinking about that. And for sometimes it might be neutral, especially those of you listing Instagram or TikTok, it might depend how you're using it.
Mhm.
But really, the idea here is that by reflecting on our values, that's going to help us ensure a larger degree of agency over our digital lives, thinking more intentionally. And so, Jazz, do you mind sharing with us on the next slide how you might use this with families?
Sure. So, as a family, when you're doing this exercise, parents and caregivers can use some of these conversation starter questions to go deeper and better understand what their kids are thinking, and also share as well, themselves. So, asking questions like, can you tell me something you were thinking about as you picked your top three values? And having a discussion from there. Looking at all of these values, which one, like Tali just asked me, does tech support or make easier to live out? And which values does tech make harder? My example of physical health, my family and we did I think it was like a 60-day challenge where we were each, in our respective cities and places, but we were doing our exercises and then like posting it just to motivate each other. So that was something that was actually helpful using technology. But it's, these are things that we just want to think about with our kids. Your values may not match your child, and that's okay, totally natural. There's no right or wrong answer to this exercise. It's really just meant to be a way to have open communication and connect without judgment, like Tali said.
Great. So thanks, Jasmine. Do you mind giving us some background on how kids are using technology and generative AI from our research?
Sure. So over the past, I would say about year and a half, we've released several research reports on kids and AI to better understand perspectives of teens, parents, and educators. I encourage you to check out this research, but I do want to just quickly highlight a few findings. In our most recent study of parents, which it's actually not on this screen, but it was our 0 to 8 study, we found that among 5 to 8-year-olds, about 39% have used AI for school learning, and about a quarter have used it to generate like creative content. And I think it's relevant to note that in that age range, so that 0 to 8 age range, AI interaction is beginning at really early ages. About 50% of parents with children in that age range have AI-powered devices like Alexa or Google Home, with 1 in 5 kids regularly interacting with these smart speakers and virtual assistants. So it's not always necessarily using generative AI just yet, but they are being introduced to artificial intelligence at very early ages. And then when it comes to teens, about 70% have used at least one type of generative AI tool, with slightly over half in that particular study saying that they used it for homework help. And so young people are feeling both nervous and hopeful about AI, just like their parents. Teens understand the nuances and have a sophisticated perspective. They know it's the future, and AI has big potential to change our world. And they also have concerns. They want adult support in navigating all of this. And when they're asked what's one thing adults should know about how teens use AI, some of their responses included that they're using generative AI as a regular part of schoolwork and learning, but it's not always necessarily cheating. That can happen, but they're using it for learning. Also, they're using it for companionship and comfort. They're using it to ask questions that they may be embarrassed or afraid to ask, and that they are just trying things out, but they do see a role for adults in supporting their use of generative AI. We found that about 37% of parents are only about 37% of parents are aware of their teens' use. So this is something we want to help parents get in front of, not to put one more thing on parents' plates, but whether it's for school or other uses at home, families just have to be aware of how their kids are engaging with these really powerful tools. So Tali, I know we got a little bit of a definition at the beginning from Maggie about generative AI, but how about you walk us through like what this actually means and looks like?
Great. Thanks, Jasmine. Yeah, so we're going to share with you now another resource, and we've just been dropping some links in the chat, but this is from our AI literacy collection. So we're going to play this video. We're not going to discuss it, but just want you to see on the side, like the questions it's answering are really thinking, what is AI? How does it, quote, learn? What makes generative AI unique? And what I appreciate about this video is that it's designed for students. I've found it personally very helpful to share with parents and caregivers. I found it helpful to share with educator colleagues who are growing their understanding of AI as well. So as we show this to you, please consider the different audiences that might benefit from this and how you might share it.
You've probably heard a lot about AI recently, but what is it really? AI, or artificial intelligence, is when we teach computers how to do things that usually require human intelligence, like identifying an object, understanding human speech, and even talking. But how do you teach a computer to learn and think? Well, it's kind of like when you train a pet to do tricks. Think of AI as a robot dog that you're training to fetch a toy. At first, your robot dog might not even know what a dog toy is, so that's the first thing you need to teach it. you show it lots of pictures of dog toys so that it learns to recognize them quickly and easily. It might make some mistakes at first, but with each correct answer, it gets a reward. Over time, the dog's recognition improves, the same way you improve at any task the more you do it. And once the robot dog gets really good at recognizing what a dog toy is, you can move on to teaching it the next step of playing fetch, running after the toy and bringing it back to you. This is basic AI, which learns by analyzing lots of data, in this case, pictures of dog toys and how to play fetch. But there's something even more complex, called generative AI, which is more like a creative robot that can improvise when it comes to making art or writing. Unlike the robot dog, the creative robot learns from everything on the internet. Videos, text, photos, you name it. When you ask it a question or give a hint, it uses what it has learned from the internet to create new things, like answers, stories, or even pictures. But here's the catch. That creative robot can sometimes make mistakes, and it doesn't know the difference between good and bad. It doesn't know if what it creates is helpful or hurtful. It can't always tell facts from fiction or know where its information comes from. It might even use someone's work without crediting them. It just sucks up all the random or not so random information that's floating out there on the internet. That's why we, as humans, have to think hard and be critical about the information we receive from AI. We have to know what it does well and what it doesn't do well. As we use generative AI in our lives, remember that we have to be smart and responsible with how we use it.
Great. Thanks, Jasmine. Yeah, I love that reminder of the human in the loop, that we are the ones who really have to always be evaluating when we should be using it, how we should be using it. And on the next slide, there are obviously so many positive uses for AI. Maggie was highlighting some of them. There's great things. What we're showing you right in front of you is a big, scary list of a lot of the things for us to be worried about. It's not comprehensive. It's just some of the things to be aware of. And frankly, why we're teaching AI literacy so that we can get ahead of this. So where you're seeing the yellow highlight, we have lessons and resources that directly address those areas. We dropped the link in the chat for our full AI literacy collection, and we just showed you this video. And now we're going to show one more resource where we're really focusing on the psychological risks piece. So if we go to the next slide, yeah, this one is looking at AI chatbots and friendship. We know on the next slide that AI chatbots are in so many different types of technology that we're using today. Snapchat is powered by OpenAI as well, and it's in a lot of different tools that our kids are using. So it's really important for us to talk about what our relationship is like with these. So if we go to the next slide, in this lesson, and all of our lessons always have an essential question, we're really exploring how do they affect our ideas of friendship? What does this mean? And we'll see on the next slide here that we're going to look at what we call a digital dilemma or a digital scenario. So in all of our lessons, we always have these different scenarios or dilemmas because a lot of things are gray, and we really want to give young people and families, quite frankly, the time to really think through these areas. So just so you know, we tweak the language. The original lesson says Logan, and it's a new town. Jasmine is from Philadelphia, so I changed it to Philly. But we're going to go ahead and read this scenario to you. So Jay just moved to Philly and is feeling lonely. Jay is having a hard time making friends or finding people who share her interests. She discovers a new AI chatbot feature on her social media and begins to chat, sharing personal thoughts and feelings with the AI chatbot. Jay discusses her experience moving to a new town, going to a new school, and the struggles of making new friends. Over time, Jay's interactions with the AI chatbot become a part of her daily routine. She's starting to feel really connected to the AI chatbot because it always replies back with kindness and no judgment, and it's always available day or night. So really the question here is, should Jay consider the AI chatbot a friend? And just for you to know, in this lesson, students are primed beforehand to think about what are the qualities that make someone a good friend. And then you really have this discussion. So we're just going to give you a little snapshot on the next slide of what that discussion might look like. Here's some different perspectives. And honestly, we've done this lesson. I did this recently with both middle school students and high school students, and it was a really robust conversation with students saying, like, yeah, this is super helpful for figuring out how to become a good friend. And others saying, oh, but you don't want to rely too much on the AI chatbot because, like, in real life, friends aren't always available. And sometimes they tell you hard truths. So you can go ahead and share in the chat. I see people making connections to other things that are happening. But if you've had any conversations with your students about their AI chatbot use, if you have any strong feelings about, yes, she should consider it a friend or no, she shouldn't, feel free to share in the chat. And we're going to go ahead to the next slide. So really, the big takeaway that we also want to leave you with is that teaching digital citizenship is preparation for our AI world, and that we really have to be giving kids the tools to understand how to navigate the digital world. So we dropped into the chat before the link to our full curriculum. We'll put that back in a moment. We're going to go ahead to the next slide. This just gives you kind of the screenshot of all the different topic areas in our digital citizenship curriculum. I see people listing already, do we have to be worried about personally identifiable information, PII? Absolutely. We have lessons about that in terms of general tech use and then specifically with generative AI. Next slide, please. And then here, you'll have all these slides, this is just the big picture for you to see all the different lessons that we have. So those first two, what is AI and how is AI trained? We really want to give young people, and again, these videos can be shared with families, a better understanding of what generative AI actually is, so that we don't think, it's just magic that's happening, but understand more of it. And then we go into chatbots, and then on the next slide, we go into thinking about AI bias. How does that impact our lives? Going deep into algorithms. And then the last lesson talks a lot about plagiarism and generative AI, which I know is a significant concern for many educators. Sorry, I was getting a little bit distracted looking at the chat. There's such good conversation happening right here. Let's go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so go ahead, Jasmine.
So when we talk about AI and supporting families, I think it's important to acknowledge that there are many different ways an educator or school may be using AI that relates to a student and their family. EdSafe AI Alliance has the SAFE framework that gives a roadmap meant to achieve equitable outcomes for students and also improve working conditions for teachers. And within that framework of safety, accountability, fairness, and efficacy, there are parent perspectives that I recently heard that we always want to keep in mind. Like, how is my child's data being collected and used? Who has access to their data? Is the school's AI use in alignment with existing policies, for example, IEPs and 504 accommodations? Are there supports for children with disabilities? Is my child's teacher or school communicating how AI tools are being used for, say, testing or grading or tutoring? And how are we ensuring these tools are treating all students equitably and avoiding bias? So as you all know, there are a host of considerations when bringing AI tools into our learning environments, and parents want to be part of that conversation. They may need support in understanding the tools and technology, and that's what we're here to do. But they are experts in advocating for their child, and we want to include them in our policy and decision making. So these are some examples of providing clear communication on how AI may or may not be used for a student's learning in a classroom. When parents understand the parameters, they can be on board with helping to enforce them and guide their child's use. This is also an example, an example of putting the SAFE framework into practice. if you're dealing with sensitive information about a student and their family, how do we ensure that we are protecting their privacy and really thinking about all the ways that we're interacting with families, and there may be AI in the room. So in this dilemma, this is just an example that you could work through within your own school as you're developing these policies and communicating with families. These resources are from Common Sense at Home. Parents can use our family tech planners to have those discussions, articulate their values like we just did in the exercise earlier, and set expectations. We have family tech planners available for different age ranges, so 2 to 8, 9 to 12, and then 13 and older. And they are available in both English and Spanish. Also, I just wanted to plug that tomorrow is National AI Literacy Day. So we encourage you to check out the website for free resources and professional development. Common Sense curated the lesson plans that are on the site. They're not just our lessons, they're lessons from a wide variety of folks who have submitted from different organizations and school districts. And there are also even a couple of family resources. One that I came across was this AI sorting game, and it's a non-tech activity where if you evaluate if something's AI or not. I'm going to put that link in the chat. And so I encourage you to check that out, to share those resources with your families.
Jasmine, can I say one other thing about the
Sure.
family tech planners? I just went to a series of PDs, professional developments focused on helping kids develop kind of regulation skills and talking about how parents and caregivers really model that or can support that. And I really love the family tech planners because the idea here is in a calm moment, you can really sit down with your child and outline your tech expectations so that when things get hot, you can say like, okay, let's go back to our tech planner and think about, what are we choosing to do and why, and how does this connect back to our values?
Yeah, thanks, Tali. Okay. I want to acknowledge our Common Sense Face members who are on the webinar today. If you're already a member, or if you're not already a member, sorry, of our Family and Community Engagement Program, it is a free program that I lead and have wonderful colleagues like Tali who help us give educators and anyone working with families a curated set of easy to share resources, and those resources and really the full program is in alignment with NAFSCE's core competencies. And so putting that link also in the chat. We offer webinars for parents that you can invite your families to attend and watch, as well as professional development trainings like this. There are lots of really great folks in this network, and we all support each other by sharing best practices, ideas, and encouragement. So I hope you check that out and join us. This is an example of our toolkit that you would get access to in the program. We have tips, articles, videos, and family activities that you can grab. So this one in particular was we were highlighting understanding AI for families, and these are some of the resources that we share. Also included in that is our Parents Ultimate Guide, which offers help with explaining things like AI companions and generative AI to families and parents and caregivers. Paid members of Common Sense have access to these guides, but if you're a base member, you would get free access for your community.
Great. This is one of my favorite pages. So what you have here, and again, you'll all get the slides, is a direct link to all these AI literacy resources. It connects to our research, to self-paced courses we have related to AI. We also have examples of AI policies from other school districts since we partner with schools nationally. So there's a lot of rich information and great examples. And I also saw in the Q&A, someone asked about, are there any assessments out there about what AI tools are better or worse? Those AI risk assessments help outline that. It's looking at different AI tools.
Okay, well, and that really kind of wraps it up for us. We want to encourage you all to stay connected with us. You can find information again on our website, and register for a free educator account on commonsense.org. And if you have a few moments, please fill out the survey to let us know how we can continue to support you as you're navigating with families all of these um, media and tech issues. And let's see if there are any other questions we might want to take, I think. If you saw any, Tali, I'm just scrolling through.
Yeah, we have time for discussion and we have a few questions in the Q&A too. But before we get to that, maybe we could just give a big round of applause and other fabulous emojis to both Jasmine and Tali. This is just, I mean, just a wealth of just really important, broad information and, and great ideas and amazing resources. So thank you for all of this. See, look at all that love coming your way.
Thank
And yes, I really appreciate that you were kind of watching the webinar chat too, as people were reacting and just engaging. And thank you for putting a number of helpful links in the chat so everybody can kind of take a look there. Um, are we okay to shift into discussion mode now? Yeah, thank
Sure,
you
I
so much.
can
It's
stop sharing my
amazing.
screen if that's helpful.
You can keep that if you want to keep that up for a
Oh,
little for people to
okay.
to participate in your quick survey. That's okay too. Well, maybe they can do double duty. I know. So first of all, I know that Monica, Cannon Butler, and one other person have raised their hands. So if you want to come off mute and ask your questions of Tali and Jasmine, why don't we start there? Let's see. I don't know if I only see one hand raised now, and that's Jane. Jane Groff. Hi. You want to ask your question? Let's see if
Holly, with webinars, I don't know that
oh, we
participants.
don't have that ability. Okay.
Well,
Jane,
I'm trying to find I think it says allow to talk. Okay, all right. I
okay.
just gave her permission to talk.
Great. All right, Jane, you're on. What's your question for us?
Hi, Holly. I want you to know that I thought that hand was clapping, and I pressed clapping, but I really do have something I'm just sitting here thinking about is our work in Kansas. We're in Kansas, is we train a lot of educators in this area of family engagement. So Jasmine and Tally and Holly and anybody else, I'm thinking about how we could work with educators to encourage them to share this AI information with families. Does that make sense?
Mhm. And that's partly your work too, Jasmine, isn't it, with your FACE network?
Yes, so having educators share resources with families is the question. Absolutely. I mean, that exactly, Holly. That's exactly what our FACE program is designed to do, is to, um, whether you're a classroom teacher, a counselor, or a family liaison, whatever your role is, if you're working or um, engaging with families, we have resources that we want to make it very easy to kind of like just lift and share, at least to begin to have some of those communications with families, and then be able to do, all of the kind of core competencies of bringing families into this conversation. We know that like they're having these questions, they are having things that they're navigating at home with their kids. Their students are also navigating in the classroom.
I
So,
don't know.
bringing bringing that all together and through some of these resources and webinars that we have for families is exactly how we support educators. And so I would encourage you to look at the FACE program and be able to take anything that we have. All of our resources are free, so we want to make sure that families get the information that they need and be able to have those conversations.
Thank you.
And Jane, also to add on to what Jasmine said, in addition to the FACE program, and all of our lessons always have a family engagement component as well, just hearing ideas from different school districts around the country. And I'm going to connect this to Kelly's question in the chat and on the Q&A. She asked about resources that are applicable for ELL adults with varying levels of language levels for a family literacy program. Some really creative ways we've heard about this are schools inviting parents and caregivers in for a night where students are showing them how they use different tools and talking through their uses and how they're excited about it. And so it's both learning like, oh, this is what my kids are doing, but also very much teaching it as like, hey, AI literacy and using AI is something that can help you, professionally too, in terms of kind of growing your knowledge. So something to think about there.
Okay, and to sign up for FACES, I just go to your website and it says sign up for FACES.
Yes, it's Common
Okay.
Sense. I'll put it in the chat again. It's
Okay.
commonsense.org/face.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And it looks like one person might have had a little, just a little bit of a challenge signing up for FACE, but they can always
Yeah,
reach out.
Abby, I just messaged you. You
Yeah,
can
yeah.
email me and I can help you get signed up.
Okay, so a few other questions for you. They're coming in through the chat than the Q&A. I know that there was one question up above about how do you ensure that sort of AI, is enhancing students' work rather than replacing it in kind of a cut and paste sort of way? And maybe how do we help parents make sure that it's being used in that kind of way with student work and learning?
I think simply raising that question is exactly where to start, to just say, how are you using it? How are you teaching AI literacy? I mean, we can go back to that big scary list of things to be concerned about and say, like, we want to make sure that the AI is working for us. Jasmine and I just came back from the Common Sense Summit on Kids and Families, and there was a great professor who shared, he said, with all these new AI tools coming out, let's remember as schools and districts that we're not the client, we are the co-creator. We want to make sure that it's really addressing problems we have versus fabricated problems, and thinking through how we can use AI to do things that we otherwise couldn't do versus just replacing something that, a human could do and probably do more meaningfully. And so it's a lot of conversations about this. And this can start off with some of the conversation starters that Jasmine shared about values, but just asking your kids or the young people in your life to tell you, what do they like playing around with different generative AI tools? What's exciting to them? What's maybe creeping them out?
Mm.
What would they do if they were creators?
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you. Well, here's a pretty concrete question about your digital citizenship curricula. Is it available in multiple languages?
It's available in Spanish.
Okay.
Used to be available in French. I was sharing as a nonprofit, we'll have other people or organizations or governments reach out. It's available in Icelandic because the Icelandic government translated it. But in terms of, I think what's most relevant, Spanish and English.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, and most of our family resources are available in both English and Spanish. We do have some resources, from some family resources that are available, particularly I think the tip sheets that we have are available in multiple languages.
Great. Good to
And
know.
yay, Jane.
Here's a kind of bigger question for you. How do you imagine AI might personalize family engagement in math over the next 5 to 10 years?
Holly, I feel like that's a question for you guys.
Doesn't it? I know. It's not a question I've really given a ton of thought to, and I'd love to hear other people's ideas and thoughts in the chat as well. But I mean, I am curious because we know that hallucinations, right, where AI is generating, they can't always tell the difference between fact and fiction, as you mentioned. And sometimes in math in particular, we hear, at least I do in the headlines, that AI isn't that great at math. And but there's also this powerful potential for a really tailored math support. I think I'm thinking about Khan Academy and Konmiko um, but to think about how families might walk alongside this kind of very personalized math support and tutoring that AI might be able to provide, especially for math as a topic in particular. I think, there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of like negative experiences that families themselves have experienced as kids learning math. There's also maybe a potential to make math for AI to help make math more relevant and meaningful if we ask it the right questions. Just wonderings out loud.
Yeah, I think that, and Tali kind of just mentioned this, one of the takeaways that we got from um, the recent sessions we were in was around having AI augment and not replace. And so I think with, when you're helping your kids with math and you're using, ChatGPT to help explain, and this was Maggie's example earlier, to help explain some concepts that I think we maybe like somewhat familiar but have like forgotten because we haven't used it in so many years. Like I think where you can kind of like check it a bit is helpful because there are issues of like the hallucinations and it convincingly telling you information that's not necessarily accurate. So then when you get to those levels, I think of math, I think this is where you kind of like come back to the not of replacing,
Mhm.
um, a tutor or an adult teacher or someone who can support that student in those like areas where we no longer are able to like tell if it's telling them the truth or not.
Yeah,
And then I'm sure there'll be more, apps that get better at it. But like right now, we can kind of like I think have that balance of like, okay, we can use it right now to help us for the things that we have some, knowledge based around, but then when it gets deeper, you're probably going to, go back to actually having human support.
right. No, that's a good point. I'm also noticing in the chat there's all sorts of interesting ideas and being offered. One person likes to use Khan Academy and photo math. Another person really encourages us to look at Learning Heroes AI Assistant, which helps answer parent questions about how to succeed in school and support grade level work. Um, Michelle says we offer prompts that parents might be wondering about math. So that's just, for any AI tool, right? The prompts and the questions are so important. This is great. So anyways, everybody look through the webinar chat because it's got a lot of good stuff in it too. I
Yeah, I
see.
like that. So I would say I like that, Michelle, with teachers offering parents prompts. So like if we're
Yeah,
an educator and offering parents things that they can try out because maybe they're nervous about like, I don't know how to use this. I don't know how to, put in a prompt to get what I'm looking for. So maybe providing, families with prompts that they can practice with.
Totally. And yeah, and Claudia highlighting that too. And I love that too, because that's the thing is we have to play with it, right? So with the prompts, it's very rare that the first time you put in a prompt, you get exactly what you want. So even for those of us educators who are using it with our parents and caregivers, maybe saying to them like, hey, it took me a few different times. This is what worked for me. What works for you? Don't get discouraged if you put something in and don't get what you want. That means we have to refine it or maybe come back to me and ask me for help with a, maybe a tighter prompt.
it's definitely an art to prompting and asking questions in AI. Thank you. I see I think we have time for one more question. And I can see that Jerry has her hand up or their hand up. Jerry, did you want to, Lori, can you help Jerry come off mute? Or Jerry, do you want to post your question in the chat, maybe? Hi, Jerry. I think I just allowed you to talk. Lori, can you make sure I did that right? Okay, well maybe oh,
Yeah, it should be all set, Holly.
okay, thank you. Well, Jerry, if you're still there, you can pop in with your question at any time.
Oh, sorry, there are two Jerrys here. I think I allowed them
Oh,
to talk. So,
Gary Sabasco.
uh,
I think I've also permitted if
yeah,
that's
yeah.
correct, Jerry. But if you
Mute. Can you hear me now?
yes, I can.
Oh, okay. This is my first webinar, so I'm very confused on how to do everything. I apologize.
You're fine.
I am very thankful for the information. This has been a concern for me. I'm the grandmother who's the primary caregiver for three special needs grandsons. My eldest is 20, going to be 21 in 2 weeks. He has been I've become aware recently, I'll put it that way, that he has been on these with a chat bot very regularly. And I'm just trying to, without infringing upon his privacy, I'm trying to figure out how do I make sure that it's safe for him because he is on the spectrum. And I just want to make sure that there's not anything going on that
Hey
could be
everyone,
detrimental.
welcome to Fun Ways to Keep Kids Learning this summer. I am Jasmine Miller.
Yeah, Jerry, thank you so much for that question and for joining today. I think a couple of things. Number one, that's I want to validate your concern and checking in. From a privacy standpoint, just and for everyone to know, there is a perception of privacy. There really is no privacy in terms of where that information is going. Most of these companies are not very clear on how they're using it. So, in contrast to a diary or a journal that I might have at home, where really the only way it's going to be seen is if someone comes and opens it. There's always leaks and breaches. So, from a privacy standpoint, know that. And I would say anyone who's using a chatbot for yourself or when talking to the young people in your life to let them know that it's not truly ever private. Depending on how your grandson is, I would probably explain to him and just say like, hey, this isn't necessarily really private. I would love to see some of your conversations. Depending on your relationship, you could say, I'm just curious. Would you mind sharing with me so we can talk about it? If you've seen something that's concerning, you might say, hey, I'm the caregiver in your life and I'm concerned. So I'm going to be checking on it for X, Y, and Z reasons. I just went to this talk today and they shared some resources about it. I don't know if any of that is resonating as a
No,
place
it
to start.
is. It is. Thank you so much. And because I'm between that and then trying, so I have 20, 10, and 5. And the 10-year-old is coming back with all of this. Oh, you should see this. I've seen this, and I'm trying to say, not everything you see is real anymore. And this is where I'm I'm old school. So this is where I'm having the hard time is trying to get the younger generation to understand that with all of this, that there's so much that's made up now that you can't judge yourself by what you're seeing out there anymore. It's just not the same, and it's a little scary for me personally.
I don't think
Understandably.
you're alone, Jerry. Thank you for
Yeah,
sharing
certainly
your
not alone. I'm
experience
going to
and
drop in the
question.
chat again the game that Jasmine dropped in for the AI sorting
Really.
game. That could be a place to invite conversation. And I think with a lot of these resources, it's really designed to have those conversations. So if the 10-year-old is showing you what he's excited about, and you can be like, great, let's look at this. Oh gosh, this raises some questions for me. This is how
Okay.
I'm going to check it doesn't match versus like, wow, I didn't know that it could do this. And that's really exciting. So that's that chance for you to kind of share your values and concerns or really just his interests too.
Right.
Is the Common Sense Face account available for the parents as well, or is this just for educators?
It is focused for educators, but if you are looking for more resources, it doesn't stop anyone from joining. So we welcome all. But our resources on commonsensemedia.org are where you can find all of our parent and caregiver information.
I appreciate that because I'm homeschooling the 5-year-old. So I just
Well, then
so
you are an educator.
Thank you, Jasmine. I'm sorry to cut us off. We're a little over time, and I just want to respect everybody's time today. But I think this was a really powerful example of how all of us are really trying to wrap our heads around this for the benefit of families and kids. Maybe Lori, you could just excel through the last couple slides here for us. Anyway, encourage everybody to check out Common Sense Media's resources. Really want to thank Tali and Jasmine for all their wisdom today. Encourage people to join NAFSCE. You can scan this code if you're from Maryland, Pennsylvania, or Maine, courtesy of MAEC. You get a complimentary membership to NAFSCE. So you can reach out to my colleague Sherry Wilson at wilsons@nafsce.org. Next slide. And there's other things coming up from NAFSCE and our Center for Family Math, including our virtual and in-person National Assembly. That's our annual conference that will be happening in October in New Orleans this year. We hope to see some of you there. Next slide. And I believe we've also, we're going to hover here for a minute if anybody is able to spend just a few more minutes to give us some feedback on how this webinar was for you. We pride ourselves on being a learning organization, and we really appreciate all your feedback. So if you could scan that QR code or click the tiny URL, we would love to get your feedback. I also want to make sure to thank our translators, Umberto and Maricela today. And for anybody who is joining us, who is a Spanish speaker, thank you for your patience as we figured out interpretation. And I do believe we may also have one other slide. Yes, we have another webinar coming up in just a few weeks on building family engagement in special education. So we invite people to check out that webinar as well. And one final thank you to our presenters, Tali and Jasmine, to everybody on the team, Maggie and Lori, and our interpreters, and to everybody who joined us for such an engaging conversation. Thank you, everyone. Getting lots more love in the chat and in emojis, so wonderful. And I think, Lori, you can, turn off our recording. Thank you. Great turnout today.
Thank you so much.
Well,